Okay, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Andrew Sporer. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communication here at Chmura Economics and Analytics, and I'm excited to introduce Chmura's CEO and Chief Economist, Dr. Chris Chmura, and the staffing experts from Express Employment International, Mike Smith, Director of Business Intelligence, and Stephanie Miller, Director of Talent Acquisition and Retention, were kind enough to join us today for this conversation. Today, we're teaming up to discuss trends and strategies for both job seekers and talent acquisition professionals alike. But before we jump into that content, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items and give you all a brief overview of our organization if you aren't already familiar. As a reminder, this presentation and a recording of the webinar will be forwarded to everyone on the call today. You can also visit chmura.com under the Resources tab and access all of our previous webinars, blogs, podcasts there. Questions? We're here today to examine hiring trends for both job seekers and talent teams. So if you've got specific questions on data, occupations, or anything else, please do utilize the chat box. Near the end of the call, we'll have a short Q&A where we'll try and work our way through any questions there, and we'll also move through them as they become relevant in our conversation. Okay. Before we dig in, here's just a bit more about us. Chmura provides labor market data and analysis through three main offerings: our JobsEQ software, consulting services, and access to data. We were founded in 1998 by our CEO, Chris Chmura, currently celebrating our 25th anniversary. Congratulations to Chris and everyone who's helped make that milestone possible. We have two offices, one in Cleveland, Ohio, and another in Richmond, Virginia, from where we are broadcasting today. But we do serve hundreds of clients literally across the country. As a team, we care about helping our customers grow their business and their communities. We like to say that we share in our customer success. So our goal really is your satisfaction and your growth. And lastly, we're driven by excellence in customer service, in data quality. I think that's what differentiates us most. In the data we offer, in the customer support we offer, in the quality of our analytics and consulting services, excellence is our top priority and informs everything that we do. That commitment has translated to an over 90% annual renewal rate for our JobsEQ customers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But I do think that's testament to the ongoing partnership and open communication we maintain with all of our software users. Speaking of our customers, the labor market data, the software, the consulting services we offer, it can benefit a wide range of industries, from corporate clients who need competitive analysis and benchmarking, to our partners in economic development seeking insights on the labor availability of their regions, to higher ed institutions who need labor market data to plan academic offerings, for those in site selection who need to compare wages and average commute time between proposed locations, for staffing agencies like Express Employment International, who's here with us today, to look for potential customers for wage insights and information on who is hiring and for what roles, or for those in workforce development who want to track real-time changes in their economy and identify which occupations and skills will provide the most opportunity for their workforce. JobsEQ is super unique in that it is almost endlessly applicable. And here's just a quick snapshot of some of our customers, which kind of speaks to its utility. I won't hold up the conversation any longer. So without further ado, Chris, I'm going to pass this to you. Excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Andrew. Before we get into the presentation, just one other item here. We put out a weekly economic update, and it's complimentary for anyone that would like to get it. And especially during these times when there's so much uncertainty in the economy, it's good to know on the first page what numbers came out last week, summary of how the economy is looking. On the second page, we highlight some of the important items that came out. On the third page, we talk about what the Fed has said, especially implications for raising or lowering interest rates. And then on the final page, a forecast of ours and then some financial data. So please feel free to sign up for that with the link here, or you can go to our web page and it's at the very bottom of the first page. So with that, today will be first me starting it with an overview of the labor market in the U.S. I'll show you some of the challenges and the trends, what employers are facing, What about the job seekers? Looking at the big overall point of view from the national side. Then Mike will follow me with a year of review, strategies for talent acquisition pros, and solutions to the current conditions. And then he will be followed by Stephanie talking about trends for job seekers, overcoming skill gaps, and distinguishing yourself in a competitive market. So with that, the national overview. First, what we're going to look at is the variation by industry. And so as economists, we look at all the different industries in the US and break them down into about 18 broad categories. And here you're seeing in the first column of numbers, the total employment, the average wages in those industries. And then in the second and third columns of numbers, it's highlighted in green. I'm showing you the 1 year history. And there, what I want you to see is the change that we've seen in employment for these particular industries. So those that are in decline, such as the first one, administrative and support and waste management, those would be things like actually temporary help agencies, janitorial services, security systems, telephone call centers. And you can see that over the last year, they've shed about 84,000 jobs. So certainly, if you're trying to find a job in one of those industries, it would be harder, or you probably had a harder time this past year. Same with ag, forestry, fishing industries. They shed about 67,000 jobs. On this next slide now, I'm highlighting the last 5 columns for a 1 year forecast. So over the next year, what kind of growth will we see in terms of employment? And the very last column is showing you the annual percentage growth based on whether we're seeing expansion in that particular industry. So retail trade, for example, highlighted in green, we're actually seeing a decline of 65,000 jobs. And that's because we're seeing productivity gains. We're seeing some stores shutting down. But even though they're losing jobs, if you look at the first column there that's highlighted in green, total demand, retailers are going to add 2.1 million jobs, 2.165 million jobs in the US over the next year, in part because almost 1 million people are exiting, meaning that they're leaving the workforce, usually retiring. And then in the next column, showing you that 1.2 million people are transferring. They're going to a different industry. So this slide, shown in green, again, shows you those areas: retail trade, manufacturing, wholesale trade, ag, utilities, and mining, that overall the growth rate is declining. But even so, looking at the total demand column, there is ample need for people within every one of those industries because of the people that are exiting or retiring or transferring to another industry. And then on this slide, I've just highlighted a few in gray, and particularly at the top there, you can see the healthcare and social assistance industry is growing, the last column there, almost 1% on an annual basis. And we're looking for about 2.56 million jobs each year over the next 10 years to be added to that industry, in large part because of demographics. Accommodation and food services is also highlighted in gray because of the growth that we're seeing there. It doesn't pay as well, though, as you can see, 29,000 average wage. And then the next gray below that is education services, and then professional scientific services that pays a fairly good average wage in the US of 115,000. That would include things like architectural services, attorneys, consultants. And so there, again, some big demand for people that have skills to work within those industries. So from an industry perspective, overall, we are seeing growth. Some industries not growing quite as fast as others, but all industries needing workers just because of the amount of people retiring. And so here now, taking a look at the entire US, and we're looking at the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is highest where it's the darker blue, and lowest where it's light or white. Here you can see that certainly on the West Coast and in areas where there's a lot of IT jobs, we're seeing a higher unemployment rate. So if you're in one of those regions, say in California or Washington, or some areas in Texas or even Washington, D.C., where you're looking for IT type jobs, it there's more competition out there right now just because of some of the layoffs that we've all been hearing about. But stepping back and going to the big picture, this is total employment. The gray shaded area toward the right there is the COVID recession. And you can see the large drop off, but we're 5.5 million jobs above the pre-pandemic peak. So the economy is growing, although the COVID recession certainly was a difficult one to go through in terms of finding jobs in particular sectors. Right now, we're back to a point where the economy overall is growing. And on this slide, I'm now showing you just the monthly gains in jobs. And so for the US, looking all the way to the right, the latest number that we have is 275,000 jobs were added in February in the US. And that's considered very strong. But if you look to the left, not quite as strong as it was about a year ago. So there are signs out there that the labor market is easing a bit, but remember, it's easing from very strong levels that we saw previously. One of the things that we're seeing in terms of that job growth, so the previous slide I showed you was based on surveys of firms. So it may be, or it is, as you can see from the slide, that people are working in multiple jobs. So they may be working a 40-hour job and then working a retail job in the evening. There's a nice article that I show you the link to below where it talks about why is that happening. It appears that because of inflation, people are not able to keep up with the standard of living they had before, so they have multiple jobs to increase their annual pay. Or it could be they're worried about a recession coming or a slowdown, and so they have multiple jobs for that reason. This article also talks about the fact that with working from home, it's easier for people who are not commuting to have that extra time that they would have been commuting to pick up that extra job. And one person that was interviewed in that article also said that some of this is people having two jobs that their employers don't quite know about. So certainly, though, in this slide, you can see that more people are having to or are holding multiple jobs for whatever reason. There is a second survey that happens every month. So when you see the employment numbers come out, it's the non-farm payroll, which is based on a survey of firms. And then you also hear about the household survey, and it's more related to the unemployment rate. So they call households and ask them about whether they're working. And in this case, it's interesting to look at employment with the survey from the households is showing that employment peaked back in November of 2023, and it's almost 900,000 lower than it was back then. Again, the non-farm payroll may be holding up better because people are holding multiple jobs, and you wouldn't see that effect here. So here we're now starting to see some signs that yes, the labor market is easing a bit. The unemployment rate, though, which also comes from that household survey, it remains very low. It's at 3.9%. That's a bit higher than before we went into the recession. The recession, again, is the gray shaded area. But it's pointing to a little bit of softening, but I wouldn't say that 3.9 shows a tremendous amount of softening in the economy. So there's all kind of cross currents going on right now. And in order to try to tease out exactly what's going on in the economy, we're looking at a lot of different indicators. Now, initial unemployment claims, typically they rise when the economy is slowing, when the labor market is easing. And here you're seeing that initial unemployment claims have bounced around a bit, but they remain very low. And this may be because employees are hoarding. So what we found is that during the recession, the COVID recession, it was so hard to find people that it appears that employees are now not wanting to let them go until they absolutely have to, because they don't want to go through the pain of trying to bring those people on board again. But initial unemployment claims are a leading indicator, and so are job posts. So in our Jobs EQ software, we spider over 45,000 sites on a daily basis. We duplicate the information, and then we provide it so that our clients could take a look at it. And it is a leading indicator because you don't put out a job post unless you believe your demand is going to hold up and you're going to hire people. So now here you're seeing a blue line. The blue line, it represents job postings this year. This is for the US overall. The gray line represents job postings last year. So you can see that we're off from a year ago. And in fact, we peaked around June 27th in terms of the number of job posts. And so we're down 31% since then. So clearly, job posts are showing us that this labor market is easing a bit. If you want to look at more detail, so what sort of jobs or what educational requirements in those jobs are easing, and you can see for all educational requirements, we're seeing a downward slope in terms of the number of jobs that require that particular degree. The red line, though, is showing you doctoral or professional degrees, and that's held up fairly well. And that may be because of the healthcare industry's impact. So when we break out all the job posts, and we pulled these numbers just yesterday, you can see in terms of the number of active job ads in the last 12 months by major occupation group that healthcare is up there at the top, with almost 4 million openings over the past year in the US for healthcare jobs. And then sales and related and management ring out the top three in terms of the jobs that are trying to be filled. Now, on that particular graph, I showed you high-level groupings of jobs. Here, I'm taking you down to a detailed level. So the Labor Department tracks over 800 different occupations at a detailed level. And here now you can see when I drill down into the top 20 jobs that are in demand, registered nurses shows up as number one with 1.3 million active job ads in the US. And then I put a star next to the others, the other four that are in the healthcare industry, medical and health service managers and secretaries and nursing assistants and LPNs. So clearly healthcare occupations are in greatest demand. However, even healthcare, some healthcare occupations are not in as much demand as they were a year ago. So here I'm showing you just all the ads in the US for registered nurses. And the blue line is 7,200 ads less than what we saw just 10 months ago. And clearly, the blue line showing us data this year compared to gray last year is much lower. So even some of these jobs that are in high demand are seeing a bit of a drop off over the last few months. Back to that top 20 list of occupations, and I've put an asterisk now next to the IT related jobs, and those jobs generally pay well. You can see computer and info systems managers pays an average $114,000, or at least that's the median wage according to the ads that identify a wage. Software developers, the average wage there, $118,000, or the median wage. And then computer user support specialists, not paying quite as well, a little bit less than $50,000 in terms of the active jobs that we've seen over the past 12 months. Now, duration, or the time to fill ads, is another thing that we look at, and I'll be interested to see or hear what Stephanie and Mike have to say about whether duration has increased or decreased in terms of how hard is it to fill some of these ads. But here, under the first column of numbers, you can see the duration, and if you go all the way down, the one that jumps out to me right now is fast food, is 63 duration in terms of the days to fill the ads. You wouldn't think that that one would be high, but my guess is that oftentimes restaurants have a continuous need for these jobs, and so they just leave them posted and don't unpost them. But again, as you go through, you can see that there are various time frames to hire these individuals. And we've had this question before on one of our webinars: what is the typical duration? And I was hoping to find, when we looked at all the job postings, a nice cyclical chart showing us typical duration. But as you can see from this slide going back to 2017, monthly ads in the US, that it's upward sloping. It may be that we're on a downward trend in terms of the last couple of months, but it's too soon to say that. So All to say, we are going to continue to look at this duration to try to tease out, well, what is a typical duration? Just like you have like a frictional unemployment rate, what would that be for duration? And then some of the, what is important in all the ads, and about 50% of all of the ads require communication as one of the items that is necessary, one of the soft skills that you need to have to be an exceptional person on this particular job. So keep in mind, again, in terms of if you are applying for jobs, these are some of the key words that you want to make sure that you have those sorts of soft skills, communication, team players, customer service. One other thing before we close here, at least my part, is we look at wages to try to get a sense of, is the job market easing? And here, again, gray shaded areas are recessions. The COVID recession, of course, wages went way up because it was hard to find people. Then it came down the year later after that. It peaked out around 6% year over year because inflation was going up. And so we had to pay people more. Employers had to pay people to keep them on the job or to keep them from going somewhere else. Now the latest number shows that it's eased to just 4.3% increase in wages from a year ago. These are wages that are actually paid to people, so it comes from the non-farm payroll report. So this is a good sign that we're seeing wages not as high as they were. They're a little bit above inflation. Inflation is 3.2% as of February. And so again, a sign that the market, the labor market is easing, but certainly not anywhere near collapsing in terms of demand. Some people are arguing that wage growth is coming down because immigration has gone up. And so here you can see employment of foreign-born individuals. And clearly you can see that particular demographic has come into this market at a faster pace than total overall employment. And so that may be bringing wage growth down. But with our job postings, one of the things that we can do is look at them in different ways. And what we looked at here is only newly posted job ads each month. So what are we seeing in terms of wage growth from a year ago in the newly posted job ads? Interesting that from a year ago, it has been almost flat. So wages are not increasing from a year ago. So this is, I think, the most definitive sign that we see that the labor market is easing. The other interesting thing that I'll point out, and maybe when you get a copy, if you get a copy afterwards, to take a look at, the increase in year-over-year wages that were actually paid on two previous charts was around 8%. In fact, let's just go back there. Notice here, this big spike was 8%. So that's for the wages for the overall labor market in the U.S., all the people employed. Fast forward again to only those job ads that are going out in that particular month. We saw a 15% increase from the prior year. So again, this shows the big swing that we saw in terms of trying to get people to work for us, the 15% back in May of 2022, and now that's slowing down considerably to where we're seeing wages just at the same place that they were at last year this time. So with that, let me hand this over to Mike, who will talk more about a year in review.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks. Yeah, so I actually want to jump back to a comment you made, and I'm sure she'll probably jump in on this a little later, but the comment about like difficulty to fill jobs or how long it's taken to fill jobs for temporary employment, I think a lot of that has to do with how difficult it is to find the right skills. So I think employers that don't move or budge on what their demands are for an employee, I think it takes longer for us to fill those jobs, especially if it's specific around hard skills or even education levels. So we are seeing an increase in how long it takes to fill those jobs, but I don't necessarily think it has any other impact or influence than just that kind of skills gap and the less availability to workforce due to hoarding. So, and I'll talk on that. So yeah, for any of the staffing professionals that are present, they will probably say the exact same thing, that we are on a down year. Actually, it's about 24 months of continual decline. I like how Chris said shedding. So we have been shedding employment for the past 24 months. And staffing is essentially, it's a really good recession indicator. We're a good lead measure for that, because when you think about employer sentiment around their workforce, oftentimes they'll cut the budget. So they'll cut contingent workforce, who are just a line item. They're not necessarily, human capital where they're paying like total comp. So they start cutting line items to thin out the budget and free up working capital. So we are typically the first to go. So there's a saying, staffing is first to fall and first to rise. And so the way it looks to us over the past 24 months is that we are heading towards that either slowing or recessionary trend. So historically, when we look at like the 08, or actually before that, the dot-com bubble, the 08, and then COVID, those recessionary times were almost identical to us. Like we fell right before, but we rose really quickly. So we keep waiting for that valley to appear, and so far we're not quite there. But the easing of the job market that Chris pointed to is, I think, a good sign for us, because as that slows, I think people pick up contingent workforce again to fill in their demands. So you mentioned labor hoarding, Chris, and that's actually we're also a good indicator for when people start snatching up labor. So I took her chart, so we'll go back to the total non-farm employees, and I just put a line chart to kind of show exactly where we were and where we were before. And so the 5.5 million jobs over pre-pandemic levels, we're looking at a really strong, really resilient job market, considering what happened during that time period. And as much as I would like to say that we're back to the new normal or back to normal, I still think COVID is wildly impacting the employment industry, especially for temp staffing. So we are seeing, and I'll go to this next slide to kind of demonstrate that. So, as the economy adds jobs and we're losing jobs, this is that labor hoarding sign. And we actually see that from a true, boots on the ground level. We're seeing buyouts, we're seeing conversions, people that go from like instead of being contract and doing weekly, they do like a 90-day, or they buy the contract out early. So, and I go back to your statement. I think it's, I do think that that's a skill-based environment. We starved on skills during the post-pandemic. Here's that big jump you talked about in hiring. We saw a huge influx of job orders, and we were, putting people into jobs, but those skills came at a premium. And now that they had them on payroll, or had the availability to move them onto payroll, that's where that labor hoarding's picked up. And it's been challenging for us, and it's probably regional. From a regional perspective, I think that there are some states that get hit harder. We also operate in a big regulatory space, so Illinois and New Jersey and California, they all have very heavy regulations on the staffing industry. So between the skills gap and between those elements, we have a really hard road in front of us. But again, we will be the first to rise out of that, out of whatever the economy holds for us in the next, ideally, less than 6 months from now. So more on the softening of just employment overall for us, looking at temp penetration. So this is our share of payroll. So whatever total payroll is for all industries, this is our share of that piece. So we typically, and this doesn't go any further back than 2022, but we typically trend around the 1.8 to 2%. So about 2% on average equals to be about, I think the last couple of years we've been around 180, $200 billion in revenue. So payroll plus markup. So our penetration into that is a very important thing to watch for us, because if we start to lose foothold, we start to lose market share. Again, back to that labor hoarding, it gives us like a good direction. So interesting looking at this chart. If you follow some of our competitors, or even some of the people that play outside of our space, they're chasing market share. They know that the market's not growing fast enough, and so they're shooting for grabbing that up. And so that's kind of my, that's, I think, one of the strategies that staffing companies should be looking towards is, when you're competing in a space, how do you advance yourself through services and through product offerings, and then workforce, like Stephanie will speak to, having the right workforce in place to fill demand right when the economy snaps back. And then the last thing, so this is from the ASA Staffing Index, and so this is basically people actually on employment. And you can see what I like about this chart is this index is a demonstration of where we actually stand based upon that previous index point, which is I think for this is 2018. So anything greater than 100 is above that index point. And so we're still declining, but on the overall pattern of where we are, we're still, pre-pandemic levels, kind of like that, the way the job market looked before. So, leading into some solutions that I would propose for people in our industry, I think, focusing on, reskilling our workforce and preparing them to fill in the gaps. Those are some things that we know that, especially from labor hoarding perspective, that we're starving for is having the right people to fill the jobs that are available. And I think as the market eases and, hopefully we see some rate cuts in the future, that would be nice. I think that'll free up the opportunity for employers to start, focusing on growth, start picking up contingent workforce, and once we hit that phase, that's where that economic expansion time period happens. So, Chris, did you have any questions before we move to Steph?
No, this is good. This is really interesting that you are seeing that drop off on this chart. But I was looking at the previous recession period. So pre-COVID, you did see quite a big drop in the staffing index.
Yeah. So right before, it's interesting. We actually started to see a flattening. So you have your economic expansion, which I'm going to speak off the cuff here, so somebody might correct me, but it's like 2012 to maybe the middle of 2018, if I remember. Like that's like the big fast and heavy growth.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So from that point, we had actually already started to flatten out when everyone was calling for, the potential of a recession, and that was, they were saying it was on the horizon. We kind of started to show that indicator, like we were slowing. We hit, flat sales. We'd had some big years before. And then, COVID hammered hard. So it's almost like we didn't predict COVID. I'm not saying that, but that prediction of a decline right before this little spot, like we had already started to fall in that index, and then COVID, really hammered it hard. But yeah, and you can see from this index exactly what that time period post COVID really did for employment or for temp employment. You'll actually talk to a sales rep and they'll say job orders were falling from the sky, and that was true. People needed help, and they were just putting people in the spots, and now they're keeping them. So I guess we did a good job.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. Stephanie, do you have anything to add? I know you've got some great stuff to talk about for our associate pool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be talking a little bit complimentary to all that you said, and I welcome any if you want to continue to add tidbits here and there. But it's interesting. We look at how does our industry, meaning staffing, how do we start to see things in alignment with what's happening in the market, or in alignment with what we're seeing trend wise as far as timing. And at Express, we have just over 800. We have over 800 franchisees across the United States and Canada. So we see a glimpse of that same market data in our own franchisees. And so what you see here in this first slide is a reflection from January of 2022 all the way to the beginning of March in 2024 for data points within our own organization, or those franchises in the United States and Canada. And although this is, you see some of those peaks and valleys that are a part of the seasonality of our business, what we are overall seeing here is, is really what Mike was just talking about, which is that decline of redeployment over that same time period from 2022 to today. So the lighter blue graph at the bottom is those first assignments that we make. And then after we've assigned somebody on their job, if we redeploy them to another opportunity, that is the darker graph in this picture. And so what does that mean when we talk about redeploy count going down? And there's several reasons that we hear or have discerned that are causing that redeployment count to decline. And the biggest one is, of course, what we talked about before, which is labor hoarding, or the idea that we had a recruiting challenge bigger than we had seen in the past for many, many years. As a matter of fact, it was probably the biggest recruiting challenge that I've had in my 26 years in staffing. Once that started to really kick in and companies were struggling so readily to find good help, they now, even if their business is flat or declining, they're very reticent to get rid of that talent because they spent a lot of money to find them. It took time. And of course, when we're in the back end of a recruiting challenge, production goes down if we don't have some of those very valuable core employees working for us. So now as we move out of, we're kind of moving out of COVID, and we're trying to find what is our new normal. Employers who typically would have let people go in a flattening market will hold on to them for longer than they did before. And how they're doing that is interesting because we're really doubling down on those retention efforts with our current full-time employees. So again, it's not necessarily just wage growth. We see that's actually righting itself. It's more in the ancillary benefits and or retention programs that every company has started to become very creative with. So is that, continuing to have conversations about work flexibility, or how we, continue to have work remote options to employees when we probably, a lot of the clients or businesses say they would rather have everybody in-house. They're continuing to heed the information given by their employees and how they're going to retain them and keep them working longer. And We have seen on the flip side of things, we've also seen employees they have some fatigue from working under extreme conditions, many times multiple jobs. There is a fatigue that happens when we overwork and are feeling the the stress of inflation going up and how are we going to make all of our ends meet. And so employees where they have in the past jumped roles more readily or quicker are not doing it at the same rate as they had in the past. So because employers are holding on to them and they don't move as easily or as quickly, then we see those redeployment numbers declining like they have. So
Steph, sorry to interrupt. I think that the picture of the fact that we still have people going on first assignments, like it does not, I mean, it's still kind of down over the past few months, but overall, like you can see, we are actually putting people on that first assignment. But what a beautiful picture for that drop off. Once they move permanent, once they move into the employer's payroll, you can see that labor hoarding perfectly. So sorry, it's just such a great chart.
No, I think that, one of the things that you really highlight there that I continue to coach when I'm working with my offices is that there still is staffing happening. There are still people who need those first opportunities. And what do those people look like? We have, what we've seen in the past, we have those newly entering into the workforce. We actually have younger generations coming in quicker because we don't have the same number of students doing traditional college education, right? So some of them are leaving high school and working and getting skills through a junior college or a trade school. You look back one generation ago, or you saw most students leaving high school into formal education of a 4-year university or college of some sort, and we got to a place where we were able to identify that there are ways that you can get those skills and that experience without doing that. So we start to see people entering the workforce a little quicker. We also saw some of those that later generation who had retired and then realized, well, maybe that retirement didn't go as far as we had hoped. So they're now coming back in and providing some assistance in the workforce. This doesn't solve our complete workforce issue. We have a population challenge that we're going to continue to face for years to come, but we do see those first placements still happening. And it's really, how do we nurture the skill gap? Like, how do we get the people where we need them? And then also, if you're a job seeker, how do we make it easier for you to find work? Because it's right now, people are expressing just the frustration of finding new employment if they need it. And you can see that I have a second graph here that I'd like to show. It's similar data. What we're showing now is really by functional role, how it is shifting from 2022 to 2023. So, of course, we have 2024 on this graph, but it really is just such a short part of the year that in comparison, you look at last year and the year before. But you see some decline in certain roles, and how do we fill those gaps? I think we've all talked about it and are hearing, what is it? How do we get some more of those skilled trade positions filled? And how do we get some more of those service positions filled when we, are having less applicants apply in those industries? And so that's one of the things that we continue to look into, ways to help the workforce really to overcome those skills gaps. And one of the things that's really fascinating is what those career clusters look like. What are the skills? What are the experience levels in certain positions that are complementary to those areas that we need more staff? And so from a staffing perspective, that's one thing that we're often looking at, are what are common skills that can work in multiple areas, whereas you just need to improve maybe one skill set or add one skill set, and you are now qualified for a fully new position. And so that's where I think in the skills gap-ish conversation, it's really about how do we look at what's available and what's complementary to get that shift in the labor market. And I would like to highlight here is that, this is not just one level. You see decline in all sorts of level. When we talked in those first slides, I think we saw healthcare and social assistance looking to increase at about 0.9%. And we have healthcare on this graph near the bottom. And while it's not the same huge gap as our labor at the top row, you still see it in those higher skilled, longer lasting positions. So there is not an industry that isn't affected in some way to getting the right talent in the door and making sure that they can really fill the positions that we have available. And I think that's what this is reflection of. Mike, I have a couple more things on this slide, but did you have a couple of points you wanted to make as well?
No, I think what you can look at 2023 or 2022, you can see like where the actual real serious job demand was. It's that, the lower or lesser skilled jobs. We got, a huge demand for those. We had the people to put into those spots. But we were in a recruiting crunch. So those that you see that we didn't have that much volume in, we were still above where we would end up being. But no, I think this is a perfect picture of what kind of, I said the job orders were raining from the sky, but you can see the skill level that was in demand.
Well, and this is one of the really benefits of having, a relationship or connection with companies like Chmura and Express, is that if we're going to assist employees and professionals to understand where do they need or where should they focus if they're looking to make a career change, sometimes it's just understanding what markets are growing and where should I look at my own skill set and see what would interest me in the future, what I can readily get skill, experience or education in to help. So if I'm, for example, if I am in a more of a general admin role and I know that healthcare or financial and insurance is going up 4%, then I can go out and do some research about what do I need to do from my own skill set base to make me, qualified or eligible for some of those roles that we know that will be growing in the future. And that has, really typically been the challenge of being on the workforce side of things is, we as in the employment arena, we do a lot of research and look at data from a lot of different points to say, how can we get the most of the recruiting resources that we have and those candidates coming in? But as a professional, mid-level or longer, sometimes it's difficult to know where that shift should be and what industries would be a valuable place to move to. So I think we start to provide those kind of resources and that data to those individuals looking to make a change. It will help them make pointed moves in their career. So again, we look at that labor market that Mike referenced, and of course, a lot of that reflects that temporary or short-term roles that we're filling. But if that associate or that candidate understood that transportation and warehouse had a 0.7% growth potential, then they start to look at what roles and what opportunities are in their wheelhouse moving forward. And so as the staffing company, we are really investing in looking at how do we upskill or how do we provide those skills gaps for the candidates so that they can go into the right industry, they go where their jobs are more relevant and more complementary to their skill set, and help differentiate them. Because, we have all seen that job applications and online job postings, there's so much saturation in that market right now. It's very hard for somebody as an employee or a candidate to stand out amongst all the hundreds of resumes that just come through those employers' desks every day. So one of the things that we're looking at and we're not alone, a lot of companies and people are trying to upskill or give those skills gaps an opportunity for people to really highlight their own background and stand out amongst the other candidates that are applying. So I bring this slide here because at Express, we're really targeting 3 different groups of individuals where they can get an accreditation badge to complement their resume and their work experience to hopefully take them to a different level when they go into an interview situation with a client. So the first one that we have here that we're looking at is really that success ready and job ready. And these are for individuals who either, don't have the experience or don't have a positive work experience in success ready, or they're newly entering the job force in job ready. And we want to enable them to have the understanding of what to experience, how to deal with conflict, how to stand out amongst their peers when they're working. We talk about things such as cell phone etiquette and, having a conversation about what does it actually cost to get to work and home and all of the things that make you successful employees at your company. So this is to complement even formal education with some of those soft skills or those communication pieces that they need to be really successful in their next job. And we talked about a couple slides ago, that was one of the things that was brought up, which was communication being the most important or exceptional skill for somebody to have to be successful. And it's true. When we talk about where we are today, communication is often a big barrier for individuals going into a new position. And so this is a lot about how do we give them those tools and what do they need to learn so that they're successful in their next job. And then the final one, office ready, is our first true skill elevation is what it is. And it's allowing somebody who does not currently have that office administrative skill path and giving them the tools to maybe move from an entry level retail or food service position into a higher level administrative or clerical role. And we want to bring those individuals who have a desire to grow, who have good work history, but maybe need a skill set advancement to get to the next level in their career. So our badge really enables them to know how to formulate their resume, take care of preparing for an interview, all the way to successfully handling customer service. We have then curriculum-based courses that allow them to specialize. Maybe it's in customer service or basic accounting. So what we're trying to do, again, is help those individuals move from one space in their career up to that next level. And we want to ensure that our coursework is similar to what they need in the industries that are growing. So it's one of the ways that it expresses for free to all of our candidates and associates trying to get them to that next level in their career path. So I know that my time is just about up, but that's an exciting way that we can start to really have individuals be qualified where they need to be and where those job growth opportunities are.
Amazing. Let's take just the last couple minutes here and run through some questions that came through in the chat if we can. I'll pop through these pretty quick and rapid fire. Chris from Rich, when we're talking about jobs, laborers holding multiple jobs, does that include self-employed in the gig economy?
It's probably including the gig economy. It's probably not including self-employed. That's a number from the non-farm survey that they estimate every year as a percentage. And then when they get the benchmark that they do at the beginning of every year, they get more specific numbers in there. So the more recent numbers, I would say, does not include self-employed.
Cool. We've got a good one here from Kelly. This is about a specific job type. Question is, what can workforce professionals do to support unemployed folks in the IT sector specifically? And this could go up to anyone. Yeah.
So can you say the question again? Is it workforce, like us as an industry?
Yeah. What can workforce professionals do to support unemployed folks in the IT sector? Going back to Stephanie's skills gap a little bit as well there.
Yeah, actually, Steph, I'll let you answer that. That's a workforce ready.
I mean, I think that we need to look at this is where one of those areas that newly entering people into IT are struggling readily, obviously, because they're holding on to those people they've had for a bit. So what we try to consider is, are you looking industry wide? Is there other industries where your experience could be relevant or different? So, for example, we often talk about, from an IT perspective, it's always about just maybe software, hardware, that type of IT. But how does that integrate in some of the new technology? And like when we automate some of these other roles, where will we be needed? And some of those experience levels can be complementary. So again, maybe it's not in the software technology, but it could be in, working in the manufacturing facility where they need somebody to manage taking care of their machine operators, and those are all automated now and have a technology piece that they need. So again, it's looking at industries, not just job positions or titles, to see where that person can be a fit.
Very cool. Got another good one here. So many of these trends that we reviewed today seem to reflect a reversion to the mean before and after COVID. Does anybody have any comments on that beyond what we've kind of already covered? Return to pre-COVID stasis, if you will?
I absolutely think the staffing industry it started to do that rebound that I mentioned that we were kind of leading into that recessionary indicator right before COVID. I think we have reset right back to where that is. We lost all the jobs that we had gained during that right after COVID surge, and we were already kind of signaling that softer job market. And so I really do think that we are within a reasonable margin of where we would have been had COVID never happened. So reset is probably a good way to define that, at least for the staffing industry.
Okay. We got another question here from Rich. Express, will you speak to the differing challenges or the needs between small business clients and medium or larger size companies in the current labor market?
That's a really good question. So Express, we typically target, actually, I'm not going to say target. So our successful niche is in industries or businesses under 200 employees. So 150, 200 employees, like those are typically the businesses that aren't tooled to do they aren't told to do quick hiring. If they have influxes in demand, they can't grow their footprint real quickly. So those are typically like the heavy users. Unfortunately, those are the ones that aren't as fiscally strong to maintain a workforce. So that's probably why the staffing industry kind of falls a little bit. We do have some competitors that do operate in the space. They play with the your Kellys and the Decos and some of the larger global brands. They do work with large automotive manufacturers. So not sure if I 100% answered that question, but I think for the smaller businesses that need labor, I think the best thing we can do as a company or as a industry is help them with the incoming demand, because I know that as consumer spending picks up, as money becomes much less expensive, we will catch that rebound and they won't be able to react as quickly. And that's kind of where that contingent workforce comes in.
All right, Chris, we are at time here. We do have several other questions. I'm going to try and follow up with everybody via email if you did ask a question in the chat. As a reminder to all of our attendees today, first, thank you for joining us. We so appreciate your participation in these webinars. You'll receive an email either later today or tomorrow with some links to watch a recording of the webinar. You'll also be able to download the slides that were presented here today. Chris, any final closing thoughts?
Well, just another big thank you to Stephanie and Mike and for the work that you guys do in terms of the helping people find new jobs, giving them the skills. I like the certifications that you have that we're showing here. So thank you. Thank you for attending and speaking, and thank you for your contribution to the economy.
Oh, it was an honor. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.